So good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us for Contact Centres of the Future. My name is Laura Kemp. I'm Cluster Engagement Manager at Dynamo, and I lead on service delivery centres, by which we include contact centres, business process outsourcing, technical delivery centres, and much more, which, as Charlie alluded to there in her introduction, employs an awful lot of people in the region. We estimate over 40,000, so quite a significant employer here. And as with every industry, we've undergone an awful lot of change over the past year, but possibly more significantly for contact centres who have traditionally been based in one physical space and work in a particular shift. So I'm joined this morning by Sharon from Sage, Leigh Hopwood from the Contact Centre Management Association, and currently Claire Hellier from AWS, and hopefully at some point soon we'll be joined by Craig from Sabio as well. Here he is, he's just tuning in. So we'll all be having a bit of a chat in a little while about what contact centres of the future look like and how we need to prepare for them. But first of all, I'm going to hand over to Leigh Hopwood, CEO of the Contact Centre Management Association, to take us through some of the findings from some recent research that they've done with their members. So over to you, Leigh.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to share what's been going on. And I think it's what I'm about to share with you are some of the headlines from our research, and some of it will really resonate. Some of it is really obvious. Some of it will resonate and maybe just bring some of what we've experienced over the last 15, 18 months together. And we had, thinking back to March 2020, in the industry, we had the perfect storm. A sudden rise in demand. Customers were getting in touch for things that we weren't expecting. And at the same time, that the constraints on how we operated because of not being able to go into the office and home working will no doubt come up, not just in what I'm about to talk through, but in our conversation as well. And then moving on to the next slide, one of the things that we did back in about April, May, June, July time was started to do some research around what was happening to the industry, what was happening to contact center operations, and we've continued to monitor and almost write a diary of the evolution of the contact center. And so going back to the first part one of the evolution of the contact center that we released in August last year, there were 6 key things that really came out. The first was being agile delivers results, and that really isn't a surprise when you think about it. The curveballs that were being thrown every day into the industry meant that you had to be agile. You had to be able to respond very, very quickly. In fact, someone recently said to me that the industry is we are experts in managing disruption because we've had to, in particular over the last year or so. The second finding that came out from that piece of research was home working is here to stay. And really no surprise, and we will touch on this again in a moment, but when we think back to how people were thinking early summer last year, there was a feeling that contact centers, why would you ever come back into the office? We've all managed to move to home working, and it works. Actually, things have changed. The thinking has changed, and I think we will continue to see that thinking change over the coming months, maybe over the next year, 18 months, around actually, do people want to work from home? Some people can't work from home. What feels for sure is that some form of home working is here to stay. The third finding last summer was that customer behavior is changing. That was really evident, the acceleration of digital channels. Customers were asking about different things. The classic was in the insurance sector. So you take car insurance for as a prime example. Rather than contacting because they had had an accident and were looking to make a claim, the kind of questions that were coming in were, well, do I need car insurance because my car's on the driveway? So the interactions changed, and they changed on an almost daily basis. Every time Boris made some form of an announcement, that had an impact on how customers interacted and what they interacted about. The fourth finding at that time was forging closer ties with other functions. And this for me is really exciting for contact centres, because I talk about the fact that it was the contact centre industry that kept the UK talking, because we were open, people were phoning, and the contact centre was the absolute conduit with customers. And that meant that other functions within a business were looking to work with the contact centre in order to get a message out, in order to interact with customers, in order to make sure customers stayed. So those ties were getting stronger. The fifth finding was the changing role of the advisor. Rather than just responding to the customer inquiry, the advisor was having to be far more empathetic. If you think back to the kinds of conversations that were happening in the contact center, it wasn't just where's my staff, or the kind of classic conversations. It was, where are you working? Are you okay? Is that the dog I can hear? It's okay. So the conversation changed, and there was far more empathy that was needed by the advisor. And then the sixth finding at that time was contact centers are becoming more strategic. And that kind of ties in everything of the first five, in that the contact center, in its part, the part that it played meant that it was the contact center that was making sure that customers knew what was going on. It was far more, it got the attention of the C-suite. Fundamentally, it got the attention of the C-suite, and as a result, it became much more of a strategic function. So if we then roll it forward 6 months and move on to the next slide, 6 months later, we did some more research a few months ago, and what was really evident was how those 6 things, which all seem really arguably obvious now, and where the world is, things have moved on even further. So being agile delivers results. Actually, where we've landed is business is not as usual. So if you want to that's it, perfect. Business is not as usual, in that you've got to continue being agile. We've got to continue to keep moving forward and responding to customers and colleagues. Home working is here to stay, absolutely, but what's become really evident is the problem with legacy. And this was the second finding in the research we did in the spring, was that those organizations that had invested in their technology and had basically stayed pretty much up to date ahead of the pandemic found it much easier to move to a home working model. And there's now some revisiting around, actually, have we got the right technology to enable a future hybrid working model? Have we got the right technology to enable the digital channels that we know have really accelerated? Which leads me on to the third point: customer behavior is changing. That's how it felt 12 months ago. Where it is now, and the research uncovered that customer expectations have moved on. So the customer now expects to be able to contact an organization through different channels. It expects you as a contact center to be able to respond to its queries. And as a result of that, the fourth part of the piece around forging closer ties with other functions, that's still there. It's still very strong in many organizations. But the fourth piece that came out in the spring was that the internal alignment varies between organizations. So those that have a really strong customer-centric approach to their business, not just within their contact center, but within their business, are finding that actually it's working. Those that don't have that customer centricity don't necessarily have those same ties with the contact center, and maybe things are just a little bit more difficult. The fifth piece, the changing role of the advisor, how has that moved on? Fundamentally, the fifth piece that came out in the spring was additional responsibilities for managers. Because the role of the advisor had changed, the responsibility for managers, that we've all talked about the importance and the growing need to look after colleagues, the mental health and well-being piece, And that has layered on those additional responsibilities for managers. So it's the conversations are still, how did that call go? How could you have dealt with that call differently? Let's celebrate how you dealt with that call. The responsibilities are now more around, are you okay? And so that's another layer of responsibility. And then the sixth piece around contact centres being more strategic, what that has meant is that because the importance of the work that contact centres do is recognised, there is a real opportunity to make change happen. And now is a great time to be looking at that investment. It's a little easier to be able to demonstrate an ROI, and partly because you've actually got the ears are open now of the C-suite. So if I move on to the next set of slides, it's just, I'm going to rattle through them quite quickly, but it's just some of the headline findings that we've had. So where are we now? This was a piece of research that we did in April, and 79% of contact center professionals would like to work in a hybrid model. That may well be more now. It might be less now, as you know, it's 2 months since we did that research, and recognizing that people are changing the way they think and feel around working from home. We're hearing C-suite saying, you've got to come into the office. This isn't across the board, but there are some organizations where you're saying you've got to come into the office. That's where the ideas are formed. You've got to do it. But colleagues, and if I move on to the next slide, empathy being more important than ever, and if you press click, colleague focused, colleague led, and everything else will look after itself is the mantra that we're following. And it's really evident that contact center leaders are listening to their colleagues. They're listening to how people want to work. And that's more important than ever right now, because the recruitment within the contact center industry is having a tough time. It's really difficult to fill those jobs. There's quite a few jobs, and we're finding it really difficult to fill those jobs. And I think the other part to support those colleagues is giving them the tools that they need. And if they've got the tools that they need to do a better job on the front end, then it means that customer experience is going to be better. And that's really important on the last point that I'll make in a moment. So the example there, speech analytics helped me make the case for additional headcount, as I could prove why call times were getting longer due to changing customer needs. That level of insight that is available in the contact center to enable you to get those better tools is really important right now. So a few weeks ago, we launched a piece of research called The Voice of the Contact Center Consumer. And what we did is we went out to people that use contact centers and asked them a series of questions. These are some of the headlines that came out. I love this one. Customer service is better than it was before the pandemic, albeit fractionally, but I think the industry gives itself a hard time. And maybe it shouldn't give itself such a hard time, because there is recognition that it's doing really well. One of moving on to the next slide, one of the other headlines that came out was that where we have seen that acceleration of new digital channels, not everyone has embraced it. What this slide shows, and maybe not to a huge surprise to some, is that the younger generation has adopted the digital channels much better than the older generation. What this really says to me is that if we get the journey right, if we get that customer journey right, then actually it doesn't matter how old you are, because it's still easy to go through that journey. And so I think the importance of really understanding that customer journey within the contact center is paramount. The next headline that we had, again, maybe this isn't a big surprise, self-serve is becoming normalized. What was really interesting when we did this piece of research, we had a data point from 6 months earlier around self-service, and in particular around delivery queries. You know, where's my stuff? And there had been that 6-point uplift into, I'm quite happy just to self-serve. Just tell me where to go and I'll find out where my stuff is. I don't need to put a call into the contact center and ask someone. And that's a fairly simple example, but the news from Bill at Severn Trent Water, they have seen a massive shift to self-serve, and why not? There is, you know, if that's a way that you can deliver that customer experience, why not? But I think what has also become really relevant is the next slide, and that is the phone is still king. And crucially, through all of the evidence that we've seen, through all of these, the research into the acceleration of digital channels and self-serve and all of these other things, the phone is still king. And it doesn't matter how good your customer journeys are, there are still some people that will want to just talk to someone. So really making sure that that journey is also really spot on. And then my final piece to throw into the mix, and this is one of the things that I think is really quite exciting. Contact center, the experience that a consumer will have with a contact center, whether it's good or bad, if it's really good or really bad, they are likely to share it. And so I feel that there is a real opportunity here for contact centers to tell more of the great stories and sharing more of those great customer experiences, so that we can drown out the bad ones, and we'll learn from those bad ones. But I think there's more that we can do to really share those great customer experiences. And I think the other piece that that really leans back on that contact centers are becoming more strategic is that a brand, and therefore the ability for that brand to sell, and therefore the bottom line of that brand, can be impacted massively by the experience within the contact center. And I think that C-suite are beginning to see that, properly see and recognize the impact that the contact center experience can have on the business. And I think that's really exciting. There are all the headlines from some of the reach. There's loads more headlines I could draw on, but they're the ones that I felt were quite pertinent to the conversation. And Laura, back to you.
Thanks so much, Leigh. You've said such a lot there that I'd like to pick up on, and I wish we had more time. We've got a fantastic panel of experts in the room. Sharon Oley, Director of Customer Services for Sage, Claire Hellier, UK Partner Lead for Customer Experience at AWS, and welcome Craig Humfrey, VP of Corporate Marketing at Sabio. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us this morning. As I say, so much I want to ask you. I'm going to get through as much as I can, so that the audience get to hear as much of your insight as possible. I'd like to start with you, Sharon, and just ask, how is Sage operating at the moment? We heard at the conference last year a talk from one of Sage's senior leaders that was called Mobilising an Army, and I bet that's what it did feel like for you guys.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, when I spoke this time last year, we had managed to get all colleagues home in record time, something that we would have totally procrastinated about for a long time. But you have to do it as with everybody else, and that's where we've stayed until recently. You know, a big focus for us has been around colleague engagement. And Leigh, I can echo all of the things that you've just talked about. You know, we've been through all of that. But big thing, as I say, for us has been colleague engagement and solving customer problems. Over the last year, we have worked tirelessly to improve that digital journey. So, you know, we're trying to get the customer to the right channel for the query type they have. But again, I would totally echo that point about the voice channel. You know, some of our customers absolutely love the voice channel. Some of the customers are going to the digital channels to get, you know, the simpler queries answered. But due to the nature of the business that we are in, you know, there are some complex queries, and in the payroll and accounting space. So for instance, when something new comes down the track, for instance, JRS, the job retention scheme last year, you know, customers did want to call us. They want to know that they want to be confident that they've done the right thing, and sometimes you can't quite, you know, manage to get that confidence and gain that confidence over the phone. We have managed to move 30% of our interactions into the digital space. You know, we've done a lot with self-serve, we've done a lot with our help centre, a lot with right customer, right channel. But I think now we're at a point where, probably going into the second and the third lockdown, it was hard for some of our colleagues not to have that human connection. Even with the complex queries, you can't necessarily see how somebody's feeling, or what support they need when you're doing everything from home. So for us, we are very much looking at how we give our colleagues that hybrid way of working. So for all we're still at home right now, we've got some of our colleagues who've moved back into the office because it actually works for them. It's on a voluntary basis, and they get the support that they need from colleagues who are in the office with them. So it's going well, but I'm looking forward to the next phase and looking forward to getting us back into the office some of the time, and then giving colleagues the flexibility to work from home for maybe 2 or 3 days a week.
Yeah. So one of the stats in your presentation, Leigh, was 79% of contact centre professionals want to work in a hybrid model. That's not a huge shock. I think that's sort of across the board in all businesses, that increasingly people want to work in a hybrid model. Is it possible in a contact centre to work hybrid? And how do you even go about managing that in terms of ensuring coverage and the right training and the right employee support? I don't know which of you to come to first. Leigh, let's start with you.
Well, I think it's proven that it's possible, because arguably, as Sharon said, some people have been in the office the whole time for various reasons. So I think it's proven it's possible. I think the process that contact centre leaders are going to go through now, and it's one of the reasons why we're doing a hybrid working series, is because it's now looking at, well, what's the best practice? How do we get the most and the best out of that model? I don't know. Craig, what's your thoughts?
I completely agree, and we conducted, and Leigh is aware of this. We conducted some very, very similar research. We started about 12 months ago at the beginning of the pandemic, and one of the clear outcomes was that there was a rapid pivot to home working, and Sharon's just kind of echoed that. You just had to do it. So the answer is hybrid is of course possible. What you now need to do is bind in the need to manage the customer's expectations. So giving the people on the end of the phone or the end of the channel the ability to flex in their day to manage the complexity of those interactions. I think there was quite a lot of sympathy for the industry 12 months ago, and then gradually, as it becomes normal, obviously customer expectations start to build. But the other side of it, from our survey, and this isn't a technology position, this is a human position, it was really about the concern for the employees' well-being. So giving them the confidence to do what they need to do in any environment. So it's much more of a gig economy position. It's, you have an outcome you need to achieve, and we're going to enable you to do that using the technology. And, not to sound flippant, we don't care where you are. Leigh, I think that echoes some of the sentiment, but I'm sure Claire, from an AWS point of view, has got a view on that as well.
Yeah, and we've got a sort of relatively unique position, because although we are the tech provider and we actually provide the technology, we've also got Amazon.com, which has a whole massive contact center itself. And we were sort of in a fortunate position in that we had virtual and home workers probably for the last 5 years. And so some of the things we learned along the way was actually, as we started to look at the data and the tools that were required for managing the agents in the virtual environment, they actually helped us improve the way we manage the agents in the brick and mortar environment as well. So it was a really interesting sort of journey that we've been on. But one of the things from the tech perspective is the more data you have, the more you can predict. And whether that data is around the employee or the customer, then the more you collect, the whole technology price range is becoming more cost effective, shall we say. The price of storage has reduced drastically, so you can store more and more data. Once you have that, you can push it into the decision tools that you've got and the sort of AI capability to really help predict what's going on, A, for your agents, and B, for your customers, and then how you want to treat them. And I think I had a lovely conversation with a customer over COVID. And you had a bubble on your slide, Leigh, that said speech analytics help me look at sort of what I need to do. And he phoned me up and he said, you see that speech analytics we've got? Can we look at it from the agent perspective, not the customer perspective? Because all of the calls that were coming into this particular contact center over COVID were negative because of the things that particular company had to close down. And he said, what I'd like to do is every time the call sentiment is negative, after 4 of those calls, I'd like to notify the supervisor so they can proactively reach out to the agent and say, are you okay? No, it's a tough day. Take 5 minutes, get back on it. So I think the technology can be used in some really interesting ways.
Claire, that's such an important point and a fascinating case study. It is, I guess, difficult for an agent sitting at home on their own, dealing with what's potentially a string of negative calls of irate customers, and they don't have their colleagues around them to sort of pick them up. The title of our conference today is Tech Leads the Way, but I think in contact centres, we know more than any other sector that it's still people that lead the way and that tech is the enabler, and that's absolutely been proven over the past year. I guess my next question is, you've just given a brilliant example, Claire, but what else should we be doing to support our colleagues through this time? How can we be identifying the right training needs and actually monitoring their well-being when we're perhaps not in the same room as them?
Yeah, there's a lot of technologies around that can help you do that. I think, we're all on a video call now. Still maintain a team call, a team meeting. If you had team briefings, still maintain those and do them over video call so you can keep that moving forward. One of the other implementations that I can actually talk about was for Deliveroo. And what they've done to sort of help the agents is they put some chat capability in. And so if the customer was chatting in English, say, and the agent at the other end's natural language was German, we would deliver the chat in English and German. They would be able to correspond in their natural language, which was German, and it would get delivered back to the customer in English. And so that takes an element of stress off sort of people using second languages all the time, but at a business level, because it is about the people, but it's also about delivering business value. It reduced those call handling times by 20%. Mm-hmm. So I think the technology can be brought to help the agent and also the customer and the business at the same time. Mm-hmm. From a training, from a training perspective, I go back to data. I think there's going to be masses more employee-based agent technologies, and then bringing that data that what trainings happened into the actual real-time capability of when a contact gets delivered and are they able to handle it. Mm-hmm. But I'll hand off to my colleagues on the training side. They probably know better than I do.
Yeah, Sharon, how are Sage approaching this?
So this is one of the challenges that we have come across, and for new people coming into the business, as I mentioned earlier, the complexity of some of the queries that we have, that is one of the areas that what we're saying to new colleagues now is we train them on Teams remotely, but when they go to take the first call, we've asked on a voluntary basis, while we still have the strict restrictions in place, would you be happy to come into the office? Because one of the things you can't see at home is if somebody's struggling, or put yourself on hold, or do you need any help? And even that camaraderie with their colleagues, or have you had a call like that before? Hearing how they're dealing with calls, that's one of the big things that our grad bays have really missed, and that buzz on the floor, that buzzing from what the human connections. So whilst we can still successfully train people from home, one of the big feedback areas from new colleagues has been they've really missed that support from one another. Mm-hmm. So we can do it, but. And I'm noticing somebody in the chat, Dan, has just mentioned around colleagues, when you want to have face-to-face contact, And very much what we're working on, our experiment right now, is you do come into the office to have that, gets some of the training or some of the team meetings or the one-to-one sessions, while still having the flexibility to work from home. So yeah, it has been difficult. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
I think the other thing to build into that is, as well as making sure that colleagues who are on the front line have got the support, the skills to be able to deal with things when they're working from home. There's also making sure that the team managers, the team leaders have got those new skills to manage a hybrid team. It's a different way of doing things, and I think it's just really important that they're getting those skills, and then across the board making sure they've got the tools to do the job. So linking it back to technology, if they've got access to all the information that they need, then it's going to be so much easier for them to be able to have the conversation with the customer and focus on that conversation, rather than worrying about which platform do I need to go into, which app do I need to go into, and when times are quite hard anyway, when you're working in a new environment or working in a new way, the easier that an organisation can make it for a colleague, then the better.
Yeah, definitely. Just following on from Dan's comment in the chat, Andrew's just posted asking about managing and ensuring consistency and quality, and it brings me around to something that I wanted to ask, which was, are businesses adjusting their targets and expectations of their staff, and if not, should they be?
I can answer that. We have done some work. We did a lot of deep dive work, as we've continued to do whilst we've been working from home. And we, one of the things we've looked at is simplifying the ask of our colleagues. As we've started to introduce other channels, we're expecting colleagues to, offer that customer service support to the customer, but then also let them know there's other channels available to them. Also then making them aware of other products and services. So it's just, we have had to take a step back and think about A, how we train people, but B, what we're asking them to do in their day-to-day role, just to take that pressure away from them.
Yeah. Great. Oh, I don't know if we've lost Craig. Is that just me that can't see him? Yeah, Leigh, what? Oh, are you with us? Oh, hopefully you'll be back. You go ahead, Craig. Is that just me that's struggling? No, everybody. Okay, we'll move on. We'll come back to you in a moment, Craig, when hopefully you've got a bit of a better connection. Sarah's suggesting you perhaps leave and come back in. Hopefully we can't hear you, Craig.
I think coming back to the quality piece, one of the things that we heard from our members was the importance of monitoring quality over the last 15 months because of how much change has been going on. And it's interesting, yes, it's being done slightly differently, but the fundamentals remain the same. And because of the changing working environment for colleagues, as well as the changing customer interactions, it's now more important than ever.
Yeah. Craig, welcome back. Did you want to add something? No. Just picking up on something in the chat there, John Harrison, just trying to read everything that he said, but the crux of it is that businesses are starting to realise the importance of their contact centre and the role that it plays. So is this going to make life easier going forwards, when one of the things that Leigh touched upon is the big challenge of legacy systems? It obviously requires a big investment in terms of time and finances to overhaul those systems. Are contact centres now in a better position to begin those conversations with their directors? Claire.
Okay. So I think you said something in that sentence that was, investment in time, but also in money. I think the way technology has changed, it's not just about the fact that technology has advanced, but the cost models have changed as well. So actually, in the past, you would have had to have found multi-millions to go and invest in, and capital up front to invest in new technology. Whereas now you can say, well, I'm going to go for potentially a cloud-based solution that effectively says, okay, pay for what you use. So you can then say, well, actually, I want to use the most creative AI capability, but I don't know if that business case is going to work for me. And instead of the traditional business case model where you think, right, well, I'm effectively going to guess at what it's going to do and have a very intelligent model, you can now say, well, I don't need to put that investment up front. I can just trial it and I can have a proof of concept and I can see if it works for my business. And if it works, I'm going to roll it out. If it doesn't work, I've put some time into it, but I haven't had to find a big front CapEx cost. Mm-hmm. So I think there's definitely different ways of investing and upgrading these days, and also adding these additional capabilities on your existing investment until such times as that naturally comes up for replacement.
Yeah. Craig, you with us?
I'm with you. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, I completely agree with Claire. I mean, we're moving into a world where, I mean, to coin a phrase from Mr. Bezos, you have to fail faster. You have to have not just the technology infrastructure to be able to develop, agile solutions to problems that you see in the market, whether they're focused on the internal folk or the customer more often than not. But you also have to have the culture in place to understand that you don't just fix your process and then stick with it. What you do is you fix and evolve your processes so that when you suddenly all have to work from home or move to a hybrid model or move back to the office, that you can maintain that level of flexibility and agility, which means that the customer's expectations are met, the needs of the agent, whether it's the desktop environment or the data you're shooting to them, or even what your AI and automation processes are doing for you, you need to be in touch with that. And that spreads the challenge of customer experience throughout the organization. It's not just about the contact center anymore. It's about the business, which is a very, very exciting place to be.
Yeah, it definitely is. I have loads more questions that I want to ask, but I'm conscious that we've got less than 3 minutes. So I just want to finish on a positive note and ask each of you what excites you most about the future of contact centres. Sharon, you're front and centre on my screen, so we'll start with you.
What I'm really excited about, and we've got a brand new office at Cobalt that we're moving to, and I've working from home hasn't really worked for me, so I'm really excited to get people back into the organisation, albeit on just to create that buzz and that human connection, but albeit just for 2 or 3 days a week, so we can be together again and collaborate and do great things together, but also offer them great flexibility. So that's one of the things that I'm excited about for the future.
Excellent. Claire?
That excites me, and that is not using artificial intelligence for self-service, but as human-assisted artificial intelligence. And if I step outside of the contact center industry and give you an example, if a consultant's looking at a medical x-ray, they have I think it's about a 3% chance of identifying incorrectly what's wrong. AI on its own has a 4.5% chance. When you combine the two together, that drops to 0.5%. I think if we can bring that as a capability to the agent, their life gets better and the customer experience gets better.
And another fantastic example of technology in use, Claire. Craig, over to you.
For me, data, gathering it, using it to differentiate, but then using the active technologies like AI and automation, as Claire says, one example. The other example, probably more mundane, taking the predictable, repeatable tasks and enabling people to self-serve, delivering the agent with the really important sometimes trickier conversations, but enabling them using that tech to handle those conversations and enabling them to do it wherever they feel comfortable doing it so that they can live their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And briefly, Leigh, over to you. You started the show and now ending it. What excites you most about the future?
I think the change that the industry is going through, and whether it's adopting the new technology, whether it's adopting new ways of working, that excites me, because one thing that we know for sure is that it will remain a people-centered part of any organization. And I think on top of that, seeing just what contact centers can do to demonstrate their real value in an organization, and really beginning to drive product, to drive service, to drive bottom line growth. That for me is something that really excites me about the future of the contact center.
Yeah, exciting indeed. Thank you so much. We're a minute over for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time, and I'd love to catch up with you all individually and perhaps talk about doing something separately from the conference in future. But thank you, and hope to see you at the next sessions.
Thank you, Laura.
Bye.
Thank you, Laura.
Bye.
Bye.